It's Thursday, December 10th, 2015, and you're back with Real in the Field Goals, the weekly Seahawks podcast with myself, Kenneth Arthur, and Danny Kelly of fieldgoals.com. And this week we've got Steve Sandmeyer on the show. This will be interesting for me, at least, because this is the first time in Real in the Field Goals history where my voice will not be gracing the presence of a moment on the show, as that was an exclusive interview between Danny and Steve Sandmeyer that I was unable to attend. And we've got that coming up for you in a little bit. Danny, is there anything you want to sort of preview with your talk with Steve?
Yeah, so we basically we went through pretty much every position group for the Seahawks and just kind of broke it down, talked about the offense a lot, talked about the run game, talked about the lack of Marshawn Lynch and Jimmy Graham, what that means. We talked about the defense, the firing of Kerry Williams and kind of what that means and going forward and all that. And so we just kind of broke it down, talked about the linebackers, talked about the defensive line, threw in a little bit of a preview for the game, but it was basically kind of just a overview of what the Seahawks are looking at right now. And it was a great interview. He knows his stuff for sure. So it was really cool to talk to him. So that'll be a good interview. That'll come up here at about the half an hour mark or so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. And so since you guys sort of talked about a lot of the position groups and everything, we'll try and steer to some other areas perhaps. Today, obviously, I did write an article about Thomas Rawls, and I made his candidacy even known for most valuable player in the league. They call me crazy, but I think I laid it out pretty good. I think the most interesting, when I put out this stat on Twitter a couple days ago, the fact that Russell Wilson has 14 touchdowns and 1 interception with Rawls and 7 touchdowns and 6 interceptions with Lynch, and those 3 game stints being spread apart in different parts of the season. I find it to be an interesting coincidence more than anything else, but then at the same time, I think it does sort of show not just a correlation between Thomas Rawls or Marshawn Lynch, but a correlation between when the running game's working and when the running game isn't. And obviously, the running game is working better with Rawls, right?
I mean, yeah, and you can obviously say that the reason for that is probably partly because of Marshawn Lynch has been fighting some injuries and all that, but it's definitely been a lot more effective when he's been in the game, and you can't really deny that. The numbers really, really back that up. He's averaging, like 5.6 yards per carry or something like that this year. Marshawn is down below 4. And so, he's just, for whatever reason, the blocking's there, the teams they're facing, maybe he's just healthier and just, right now he's just faster or stronger or whatever. He's been really, really good. And so I think there's no doubt that the offense has been better when he's been in there.
I think, it's interesting too, because you look back at other surprise seasons by rookies, and the whole it's across the spectrum of how these careers went on to be. Some of the players like undrafted free agents that had big rookie seasons would include a guy like Dominic Rhodes, who went over 1,000 yards, and LeGarrette Blount, who went over 1,000 yards. Both those guys were undrafted. And then in a sort of a different case, maybe not undrafted and maybe not, his rookie season, but then you look at a guy like Jamal Charles and you say, here's a guy that came out of nowhere, and people say, well, it's Kansas City's offense or whatnot because it worked with Larry Johnson and Priest Holmes, even though, we at this point we're going over different offensive coordinators and coaches and everything. But, it is something where I feel like when I watch Thomas Rawls play, I'm not seeing a fluke. I'm seeing a guy making plays. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And at this point, I don't think there's any way you can call him a fluke or I think you can genuinely be excited about the player now. I mean, after kind of seeing what he's been able to do, the only questions in my mind are obviously, related to durability and longevity. And so other than that, he runs really, really hard. He's got good feet. He's got good vision. He breaks tackles. He's smart with the football. He obviously had that fumble last week, but he didn't let it affect him. He came back out and protected the football well. He's good. He's good so far in the pass game. He has I don't know if he has any real drops, but he definitely, he's caught some tough passes in the passing game. He seems like he's been holding up his end of the bargain in pass pro. I haven't noticed him miss any blitz pickups, and so he seems like a pretty legit player. I have no doubt that he's going to be a contributor for the Seahawks for, the next couple of years. And so that's really kind of crazy to think about, because I definitely never remember being this excited about like Robert Turbin. I thought he was like going to be a functional role player at best. I was obviously on the Kristen Michael show or train, but he just kind of couldn't figure it out. I think that that was kind of, that points to the the mental side of this for you. He couldn't figure out how to put the ball in his left hand. He couldn't. I think he was just making too many mistakes. Well, everything we've heard from the Seahawks, and so that's kind of one of those things that makes you appreciate how you really do have to understand the football X's and O's of the game to play. You have to be they call it FBI, football intelligence.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was female body inspector.
That's also a really great T-shirt. Yeah. Also a thing in the government that investigates stuff.
Oh, like X-Files.
Right. Something like that. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and I forgot, that Thomas Rawls was third in the preseason in rushing yards, and really with yards per carry and everything, probably had the best performance by running back perhaps in the whole preseason. And we talk about preseason and taking it with a grain of salt when we were talking about Frank Clark and the season that he had, but then now here we are, and Frank Clark is starting to show some of that potential, and obviously Thomas Rawls, who we don't think we paid as much attention to because of the fact that he was so unknown as part of the rookie class, and also just it's a running back situation. The leading rusher was Zeke Zenner, who I think has some potential for the Lions, but obviously hasn't shown what Thomas Rawls has. Nobody has as far as the rookie class goes, except for Todd Gurley. And I mean, there is, it's interesting though. Yeah. And, when he compared his numbers to Kristen Michael, and Kristen Michael and him got like basically even carries in the preseason. And I'm assuming Kristen Michael, although I can't remember now, was ahead of him, getting probably more work with the ones and twos. It's pretty impressive that Thomas Rawls basically not just kicked his ass, but kicked Robert Turbin's ass and just got the job. So, anybody has a chance to make it in Seattle if they get the opportunity to do so. And
I think we were looking past Rawls a little bit because there was so much depth there, or what we thought was depth. But then obviously, within a couple of days, the Seahawks had traded Kristen Michael, and I can't remember the timeline of Robert Turbin. I think he got hurt. I can't remember when he got hurt, to be honest. Did he get hurt during the preseason?
I do not know.
I can't remember. But anyway, he got hurt early enough, and then they put him on the IR and then released him from the IR and whatever. He was gone within pretty close time frame in terms of same as Kristen Michael. I think it was a preseason because then they picked up Fred Jackson. So
right. But if they had obviously, if they had loved Robert Turbin, you wouldn't cut him just because he was going to be hurt for a little while. You would keep him around. So obviously, I think Fred Jackson was the upgrade to Robert Turbin, and Thomas Rawls was the upgrade to Kristen Michael, and everything that you thought maybe you were getting out of Kristen Michael, now you're getting out of Thomas Rawls. Perhaps a future there after Marshawn Lynch. So yeah, very exciting to see what he will do every week, including this coming week against the Baltimore Ravens, and see what Russell Wilson does, and follow up to his streak right now. Talking about the Baltimore Ravens, their head coach is John Harbaugh, and he was one of the few head coaches in the league to come from a special teams background, and the Ravens have had very good special teams because of that. So that's my transition into special teams, which I believe you're writing about right now, getting prepped up for some special teams talk and maybe some advanced stats on special teams, and kick coverage and punt coverage and all that kind of stuff. So with the Seahawks, what are your early findings perhaps on special teams, and which ways they're lacking and where they really are ahead of the curve?
So they're kind of all over the board. To be honest, they're middling at best in terms of the overall special teams grade that Football Outsiders gave them. But they're good they're good in some areas. Obviously, they have a kick return touchdown and a punt return touchdown at Tyler Lockett. The most any team has in terms of that is 2. So they're tied for the lead in terms of the combined special teams touchdowns. That doesn't count block kicks, block punts, things like that. I'm just talking returns. So that's obviously a good thing. But they have also given up a touchdown return and a punt touchdown return as
Yeah.
well. So kind of little give and a little take there, of course. I did, I just kind of did a deep dive into the whole league in terms of best special teams units. I think Kansas City is one of the better teams there because they have the best overall starting field position of any team in the NFL. So that's big. And I mean, it's more than just a return game because that includes punt return. So your offensive, ability features in there as well.
Plus, there's got to be some sort of caveat there when you're talking about, touchdowns allowed on special teams, which is like, if you give up a touchdown return to Brian Walters, it's not the same as giving one to Cordarrelle Patterson. That these are the elite
Right.
kick return, Cordarrelle Patterson and Tavon Austin. So, in the same vein that when someone gives up a touchdown return to Tyler Lockett, I think, we say, yeah, because we think that guy's really good at doing that. So, I wonder if Football Outsiders, when they do their DVOA, for example, if how much they're accounting for the actual quality of the returner in those stats.
I think, I don't know. I talked to Vince Verhey last night about this. So there was an interesting stat. It's Football Outsiders. Let me pull it up. It's their kick return rating. And so that's under the special teams thing. And basically what it says is it gives you the amount of points your return team is worth above average, meaning you catch the same kicks. So like say, for instance, you catch a punt at the 5-yard line. For instance, Minnesota kicking team is worth almost 2 touchdowns more than the average based on the same kick to the same spot. So yeah, it does kind of account for who's got the better kick returner, if that makes any sense. And so I looked at those numbers. There's some pretty interesting things in there. Let me pull it up real quick in terms of where the Seahawks are. But right now, let's see here. Seattle, they're 7.1 points above average in the kick return department. So that means that, they're a solid touchdown above the average in terms of the same kicks to the same spot. And so that tells you that Tyler Lockett's doing a really good job back there. Minnesota's 13.3 points above the average. Cordarrelle Patterson is obviously doing his job. He's obviously been relegated to basically that is his only job. But some of the other teams that are kind of good in this area, the Green Bay, they have a pretty good kick return team, 5.3 yards points above the average. Detroit has a pretty good one with Amir Abdullah. Let's see here. Washington's really good. I think Rashad Ross is their kick returner, and he's done pretty well. And the Giants are really good. They have 10 points above average. Dwayne Harris, I believe, is their kicker. And
Dwayne "The Rock" Harris.
Yeah. In terms of the punt return game, we talked about how his average, punt return, Tyler Lockett's average punt return hasn't been that great, but he's actually 4.5 points above the average in the punt return game. So, he's making the most out of kind of where he gets the ball. And they account for, fair catches and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm a little bit, just watching Tyler Lockett over the course of the season, I'm a little bit scared that there's, because so far he's been really good about handling the ball. And maybe it's nothing to be concerned about, but the way that he dares opposing kicking teams and punching teams to stop him, even if they're within like 5 or 6 yards, he'll catch that ball. He hates to fair catch it. And I'm a little bit terrified of, in a big game situation of him trying to make a big play in a Deshaun Jackson type way and doing something bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the fear. He seems to be like a pretty smart player, and he's still a rookie though, and so you kind of worry about that. But that's really, I'm not too worried about that. I think he's just proven that he's not making stupid decisions out there, and so I think with a playmaker, you kind of have to like give him the opportunity to do what he does, and I think they've done that. And so moving forward, I'm not too worried about it. In terms of the Football Outsiders punt return team thing, Philadelphia is the top by far. Darren Sproles has 2 punt return touchdowns on the year. He's obviously dangerous every time he touches it. Cleveland second. I think Travis Benjamin might be their punt returner, though I'm not. I'm just picking that off the top of my head. Keep an eye out for Baltimore. They're 6.7 yards above average in terms of, or points above average in terms of the punt return game. So that's something to watch this week for sure.
Yeah,
And
their punt returner is it's either Jeremy Ross or Kalen Clay. I'm
I think
seeing
it,
both
yeah,
here, and Clay has got the touchdown.
yeah. So they're dangerous. And like you said, I mean, obviously with Harbaugh being a former special teams coach, it's obviously a huge
Well,
focus for
let's
them.
transition to the Baltimore Ravens real quick then,
Yeah.
and just talk about their strength because yeah, this special teams second in DVOA and special teams overall, 22nd on offense, 21st on defense, and you'll see that it's a common sort of trend a lot of the times with these teams that seem to be playing really bad, but then they're okay in the DVOA because just below the Ravens is the Giants, who are 20th on offense, 27th on defense, but first in special teams.
Yep.
The Ravens are 15th in DVOA overall. A large part of that, but some of that DVOA goes into the fact, that they had other players who were not around anymore. Most of their top players right now are on injured reserve, including Joe Flacco, Justin Forsett, Steve Smith. I mean, those are their top three
Mm-hmm.
offensive players. Dennis Pitta obviously been out for a long time. Terrell Suggs, and you could just keep going on with a couple offensive
Yeah.
linemen. And obviously the Ravens not looking very good in this situation right now because of their injuries. But still, this is a game on the road, right? So there is sort of that anything could happen aspect to it. Or do you think that, with the way the Seahawks are playing right now and, the fact that they're facing Matt Schaub, that it is sort of it should be a gimme sort of game?
I think it should be a gimme. I don't think that Baltimore is as good as Seattle. And I think that Seattle's playing really well right now, and Baltimore's not playing very well right now. They're actually 19th in weighted DVOA, and which means they're going in the wrong direction. They're 15th overall, but they're going in the wrong direction in terms of what they've played recently. And it makes a lot of sense, obviously, losing your starting quarterback, losing, your best receiver and some of your best players over the last month or whatever. And so it makes a lot of sense. I don't think Baltimore. I think Seattle should win handily. That said, like you said, I mean, anything can happen on any given day, and we've always seen weird crap happen in the NFL to teams that even that are in the playoff hunt. So I'm definitely not like going out there declaring victory before the game. I think the Seahawks should win. They're the better team. Even if it's a road game, 10 a.m., I don't think that should factor in. I think the Seahawks should be fine, but you just never really know. The other thing is, we don't know for sure if Clausen's going to be playing or not. I think there's still kind of it's up in the air whether it's going to be Clausen or Schaub. But I think regardless, I think Seattle, should handle this game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if, like we said on the third instant reaction podcast, it would be interesting to see if Clausen comes in for the second time with a second team.
And get shut out again. How funny would that be?
Yeah, that would be pretty amazing. I mean, just some of the Ravens' top players now because of the injuries. If you're talking about Matt Schaub or Jimmy Clausen, you're talking about running back instead of Justin Forsett. You're talking about Javorius Allen, a fourth-round rookie. He's averaging 3.9 yards per carry, and really since Justin Forsett got hurt, he's had to handle the big load. He's averaging 3.6 yards per carry. So, when you're asked to do more of a job, that's either you maybe step up in a Thomas Rawls type way, or it's actually, you're not quite ready yet, what have you. Kamar Aiken having to be their number one wide receiver, an undrafted free agent out of Central Florida that is in his fifth season now, and really being tasked with a job that he's never had in his career of having to take that up. Crockett Gilmore, the top tight end. Chris Givens, the former Rams wide receiver, has been put into action for the Ravens. It's pretty insane.
That's someone to watch this week, I think.
Chris Givens is a player that you'll be looking out for.
Yeah, he, obviously he's a former Ram, so he's played the Seahawks before. He's kind of given them trouble in the past. He's one of those guys that can get deep. And so the Seahawks have to be careful with him, I think. That's the one guy I'm kind of worried about. And then obviously Crockett Gilmore actually is a pretty good tight end. He's a big guy, can stretch the seam. Obviously we've seen what the Seahawks have struggled with against tight ends. The Ravens have two pretty good tight ends. There's a question mark whether or not they're going to be able to be healthy and playing this week. Max Williams, a rookie. But yeah, I mean, they've got a couple good tight ends. They've got Chris Givens, who I think is kind of a sneaky, under the radar threat against the Seahawks. And other than that, though, I'm not worried about Buck Allen. I don't think that's going to give the Seahawks too much trouble. And I don't think Schaub or Clausen are particularly good, so that's good.
Yeah,
But
well, you know what they say: if you got a couple good tight ends, you got a couple good chances to score against the Seahawks.
that's
So
exactly what they say. Yeah.
on defense, I mean, they've got players that we know: C.J. Mosley, Will Hill, Jimmy Smith, Ladarius Webb, Elvis Dumerville, Courtney Upshaw. Maybe not all like having their best seasons or their worst seasons, but definitely there are talented players on defense. And I mean, you can't discount the fact that John Harbaugh, you know, for a long time is, for the last few years at least, been considered one of the best coaches in the NFL. And if you got good coaching, you've got, you know, more of a chance than, you know, say the Cleveland Browns or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's I don't want to like give off the impression I'm looking past them or anything like that. I just think
To the Cleveland Browns, by the way, I just realized being the next team.
right. I just think with the way the two teams are playing right now, the Seahawks are the better team. They should win, and I think they will win. But the caveat, of course, is that anything can happen in the NFL, and the Seahawks go out there and not play well or lay an egg, or Russell Wilson, you know, regress back to kind of how he was playing earlier in the year. There's a lot of factors, and
it is interesting that this game originally was slated for Sunday Night Football and then obviously being flexed out. But, you know, preseason, they're looking at this as a possible Super Bowl preview.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Seahawks might be getting enough momentum to be in that talk again, but obviously the Ravens won't. Probably, you know, and let's just throw this out there. If any of the Baltimore coaching staff is listening or the executives, probably just best for you to lose this game. You know, get yourself some draft position. With the way the season has gone for a lot of the teams, you don't know if 4-12 might be worth the top 2 pick because, you know, there's no team in the NFC with less than 4 wins right now.
Yeah.
Which is
I
just
mean, right
insane.
now the Browns are the worst team, and they could still win a couple of games in theory.
The fact that not a single team in the NFC is like worse than 4-8, isn't that pretty nuts at this point? The fact that everyone has pulled themselves up a little bit, even when things are going terrible, like the San Francisco 49ers, and then other teams like the Rams, they were 4-3, they've lost 4 straight. The Cowboys pulling up a win, and they're obviously 1 game back in the NFC East.
Crazy.
It's going to be one interesting thing. I mean, obviously, a podcast like this, especially when it comes out on Thursday, is very time sensitive. But for those that do listen to this in the early afternoon or maybe even during the game, there is a huge game tonight between the Vikings and the Cardinals on Thursday Night Football. You know, each loss, either team taking a loss will have some sort of significant impact on Seattle, depending on how Seattle does this weekend. But how do you see? I mean, obviously the Cardinals are a heavy favorite, but how do you see this game going tonight?
Yeah, I don't think that the Vikings will be able to hang with the Cardinals. You know, the Cardinals have laid a couple of eggs in the last, you know, or they're not in the last couple of weeks, but like this season, just in general, they barely beat the 49ers, which was kind of unexpected and you know, out of character for them. And then they lost to the Rams. So there's 2 games on their schedule there that you kind of wonder about. And like I said last week, the Vikings are built similarly to some of these NFC West teams, and so in theory, there's a way that the Vikings could give them some trouble, but I don't see it happening because the Vikings are out. Some of the guys that they were missing last week, Harrison Smith's gone. Sendejo, another one of their safeties, is out. Linval Joseph is out. And then Anthony Barr is out. So those are some of their best players on defense, and I just don't think they'll be able to overcome that. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is going to do well versus the Cardinals' really strong defense. I think it's going to be kind of a similar game to what we saw last week with the Seahawks. And so at this point, you know, there's kind of conflicting arguments on who you want to win, who you're rooting for in this game. I personally don't see the Cardinals losing out at this point. So I think, you know, at this point you want to kind of get ahead of the Vikings.
You know, it's interesting too, because it's like, I mean, I see it in another way of just being like, if in all likelihood the Vikings lose, they fall to 8-5. If all likelihood the Seahawks win, they go up to 8-5. Then obviously the Seahawks move up to the 5 seed. Now, if you're the 5 seed, then you go and you play the NFC East, which means you've got a road game, but you're going against a team that's 7-9 or 8-8.
Right.
You know, so there's that advantage there that you're playing a dumb team, and then you have to go on the road and you have to face, you know, the 1 seed or the 2 seed. Now, if the Seahawks actually if the Cardinals lost tonight and the Seahawks somehow managed to win the NFC West, whatever, they would likely, because that meant the Cardinals lost a few games, then you'd only be 11-5. Then I think that might not even be good enough, perhaps, to get the 2 seed. The Packers could probably win enough games to get the 2 seed, which means the Seahawks would be the 3 seed. Now, if you're the 3 seed, then you're playing the 6 seed. So you would get a home game against a team like the Vikings, for example, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, either way, I think whether you're the 3 seed or the 5 seed, you've got a pretty easy matchup in the wild card round based on the fact that I think the Seahawks and the Cardinals are much better than anyone in the NFC East or anyone that could be the other wild card. And then in the second round, you're going on the road. So really, I think that, and it really, I mean, like, I just see it as a situation where it's not going to make a huge difference at this point because the Seahawks already lost 5 games. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. You might as well, I think just root for, whatever you root for the Vikings or root for the Cardinals because or not root necessarily for them, but just be fine with the Cardinals winning and the Vikings losing and getting the 5 seed because either way, I think the Seahawks are going to be on the road in the second round. And I think if you're going to Carolina or Green Bay in the playoffs, like I don't have necessarily like a preference in either one of those situations.
Yeah.
I think, because of the way that Lambeau is, there is not any reason to think that playing the Packers would be easier than playing the Panthers. So I think that, unless you're talking about an NFC championship situation where one of the others 1 seed or 2 seed didn't win, it's such a obscure situation that you're trying to play out in your mind that I think the Seahawks just need to obviously we just need to focus on the Seahawks winning. And I think getting the 5 seed will be not that much different than actually winning the division, believe it or not.
Yeah, that whole spiel right there is exactly why I don't fiddle around with playoff seedings very much. Just because,
come on,
it's just because it's so there's just so many scenarios that can still happen. So I just don't worry about that at this point. I might worry about it week 16, 17, but
well, I think I still, what I did to the American public right there was I put them at their minds at ease, and let them know that giving them a reason why winning the NFC West isn't a big deal at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The Seahawks, the best situation for the Seahawks would have been beat the Panthers and Bengals and be 9-3 right now.
Yeah.
So that didn't happen. This is more of a situation like 2012 where they, went 11-5, got an easy first round game against the Redskins, and then a winnable game in Atlanta that just didn't turn in their favor.
Right.
And I really predict, for some reason, I just feel the same thing. I think that it'll be the Seahawks going to a place like Washington. They win easily. The next week they go to Carolina. They've proven they can win there. And then I think it's Arizona for a chance to the Super Bowl. That's just my gut instinct. I've always gone with my gut. My gut has been right most of the time. And I think it's going to be Seattle, Arizona for the NFC Championship game in Arizona. And AFC, I have no idea. It's a pretty wild race out there in the AFC with the Patriots getting all banged up, the Broncos suddenly, getting much better, having replaced Manning with Osweiler. Do you have any sort of gut feelings about who you think is the best team in the AFC?
That's a tough one. I right now, to me, it feels like the Bengals are the best team. They're the deepest. They have had pretty good injury luck. Right now, they're the inside track for the number 1 seed, so that's important. They've got a really strong defense, really good offense. They've got stars. They've got depth. I don't know. To me, they look like the best team. A lot of it kind of depends on what you get from Andy Dalton, obviously, which, in the past has been really inconsistent and really hard to guess. But if he keeps playing the way he's playing, it's tough to see anybody beat the Bengals, in my opinion. But that said, I really like the Broncos as well. I like the Patriots still in terms of I think they're a good team. Once they get Gronk and Edelman back, they're going to be a lot harder to stop. And so I don't know. The AFC is really tough.
Yeah, I consider the Bengals to be the most balanced team in the AFC. I consider the Broncos to have the best defense in the AFC, and I consider the Patriots to be, the most experienced and dangerous in the AFC. So
yeah,
each one has something going for them. The Bengals play at Denver later in a week,
that'll be a fun one.
Yeah, in a week or two, and whoever wins that obviously will have an edge. If one of those players, if one of those teams wins the rest of their games, they will be the number one seed. The Patriots, having lost 2 games in a row, the trouble being, that they just are so injured right now with Gronkowski and Edelman and Amendola and Dion Lewis that uh, they're just not the same team, and they're suffering for that. And it's not really as much of a concern for us right now in the NFC, but it is interesting to watch if you're a football fan. So,
Absolutely.
uh, speaking of interesting to watch, here's something interesting to listen to. It's Danny Kelly's interview with Steve Sandmeyer. So let's kick it over to that. And I won't be there, but I will be back shortly. And I'll miss you very much. All right. So, all right. Let me go. So then, yeah.
Do you want to do the outro too?
Yeah.
Quick one? Yeah.
All right. So there it was. And I'm pretending to have listened to whatever that was, but I'll actually listen to it later. Danny's interview.
Whatever that was.
Danny, I really like that time in the interview when you asked Steve Sandmeyer about the Seahawks. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a really good conversation.
Yeah.
No, honestly, like it was good. I like talking to him. He really knows his stuff. It was kind of a good back and forth, and I think people like it. I think you'll like it, Kenny.
I will like it, I think. And if I don't, then we'll have to talk about the future, and I'll have to make sure to show up for every interview.
That's true. Yeah, if you have a problem with it, maybe you should.
Yeah, that's very true. I don't get this. The NFL Pro Bowl voting, which I'm looking at right now. So you've got Brady, Newton, Dalton, Rodgers not having a good season. Obviously, this is voting. Gronkowski. Then you got number 6, Devonta Freeman. Like, I know he had 9 touchdowns early in the year, but man, how old is this voting? I don't know. I don't know how this works. Obviously, Russell Wilson needs to be getting some of these votes. And, I mean, if we're just throwing around votes, Marshawn Lynch is a legacy, right? So just throw him some freaking votes.
Might as well.
Yeah, so we'll talk about Pro Bowl voting maybe briefly when the things are announced and we know how many Seahawks are out there. I think there'll be plenty. I think I think the early front runners maybe Earl Thomas and Russell Wilson, and maybe Richard Sherman. He doesn't have the interceptions, but he is a big name. Cliff Averill and Michael Bennett, though, that's got to happen at some point, right?
And it's such a tough position to get Pro Bowl votes at because there's all these like superstar pass rushers, but I think they certainly deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really difficult for KJ Wright for that same reason.
Right. Yeah, you're going up against guys like Von Miller and stuff. So,
but I think that, with a guy like KJ Wright, there might be an opportunity in a different sense, maybe than that top 100 voting stuff next year.
For sure. Yeah.
I think there's more people recognize in that sense. You look at a guy like DeAndre Levy getting top 100, the last couple of years. I think with Levy out this year, obviously, a guy like KJ Wright with the season he's having, I think players recognized how dangerous he is. And in the same sense, Bobby Wagner losing some of that sheen this year. He's not been talked about as much.
Losing some cachet. The prestige is down a little
bit. Cam Chancellor, he had the holdout, and he hasn't really been talked about a whole lot. Not a lot of
that did not endear him to fans.
No, not in the slightest. And I think, as I wrote about with Thomas Rawls, he's got a good shot to get 1,000 yards. He's leading the league in some carries, in some yards. He's leading the league in the yards per carry, but he's got some eye-popping stats. I mean,
leading the league in carries.
He's leading the league in some carries, and others he's not leading the league.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. He's got 3, I think, 150-yard games, which is the tied for the most in the NFL this year, even though he's only really had 6 games. So that's pretty weird. And I think with the way the running back class is, really, it's weird because he's in 10th place in rushing right now, but he's only 65 yards behind 4th place.
That's pretty weird. It's hard to believe.
It is hard to believe.
It kind of points to a lot of there have been a ton of injuries on the running back position.
Lots of injuries, lots of ball sharing.
RBBC?
Huh?
RBBC, running back by committee?
Yeah, RBBC. Lots of that stuff going on. So, any sort of, Le'Veon Bell getting hurt, there's all these sort of things going on where, yeah, I think Thomas Rawls very might well get a Pro Bowl, which is just crazy. Undrafted free agent out of Central Michigan. Playing behind when he came in, Marshawn Lynch, Robert Turbin, and Kristen Michael. And then there it is. Yeah. Anything can happen, which is why we'll stay cautious this weekend against the Baltimore Ravens. But definitely the Seahawks should win that one going away and come out 8-5 with home games against the Browns, the worst team in the NFL, the Rams, who've lost 5 straight at this point, maybe 6 straight by next weekend, which only makes them perhaps scarier. And then finally, Week 17 at Arizona. So as usual, the Instant Reaction Show will be coming to you. Actually, not as usual anymore, but this week the Instant Reaction podcast will be coming to you, we think, right after the game against the Baltimore Ravens around, Sunday evening, 5-6 p.m. PST. Then you'll get the Instant Reaction Show. So subscribe on iTunes for that. Follow on Twitter, Kenneth Arthur S. Field Goals. Go to fieldgoals.com. I've got an article coming out on rollingstone.com tomorrow denouncing someone's MVP candidacy.
Oh, I think I know who it is.
Yeah, there's a little teaser there for you. If you've been following me on Twitter, you probably do know who it is.
Yeah.
So check that out on rollingstone.com. 3,000 NFL mock draft. We had Miles Killebrew on this week, a safety prospect out of Southern Utah. Normally, you wouldn't think that a prospect coming out of Southern Utah would be of note. There's only been one drafted in history, but Miles Killebrew being talked about perhaps as a first-round pick.
I like his name a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him, too, about his name, the name Killebrew and what it connotates. And if you want to hear all that, just listen to 3,000 NFL Mock Draft. The Deep Balls Pick'em podcast came out yesterday, correct?
Last night.
So check that out.
Jackson and I are both in the 91st percentile, so I think that's pretty good.
Awesome. Then you've done that without Jackson's help pretty much, right?
Right. We make our own picks independently, and then we talk about it.
Yeah, because Jackson always talks about his percentile, but you've done that too to show that maybe he's not so special. So there you go.
He's not as good as everyone thinks. No, no. He actually, I was leading him until last week, and then he caught up with me on 2 games. So I'm gonna have to. We disagreed on 2 more games this week, so hopefully I can kick his ass.
Yeah, because you guys don't go out to disagree. You just go out to make the picks, and if you make the same pick, then that's just the way it is. But
this is the least. It's not hot takey. Basically, people will complain, "Oh, you picked all the favorites," but it's like, yeah, we're trying to get them all right.
Right.
This isn't trying to be like the crazy picks podcast.
So when you disagree, it's it's for a good reason, and it's interesting to see those 2 ways that and I'm sure most of the time when you do disagree, it's not like you vehemently disagree.
Exactly.
You just are like, I don't know, man, I'm just thinking. So I mean, I would guess that the games that you disagreed on this week were there's a few close ones, but tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'm gonna say the Steelers and the Bengals.
Let me pull it up real fast here. Trying to remember.
Because we do got Pittsburgh at Cincinnati.
We both picked Cincinnati.
Yeah, that makes sense. Buffalo at Philadelphia.
We both picked Buffalo. He picked Jacksonville. I picked Indianapolis. So that's one.
Okay. Because that's home.
Yeah, and then I picked Miami, and he picked Giants. So those are the 2
Monday
different.
Night Football.
Yep.
Yeah, those would be close games. I don't know what to think about either of them. They both have cases.
That's kind of what we were saying too.
Interesting stat that I saw is the Giants are 5-7, but if every game ended with 75 seconds left to go, they'd be 10-2.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's to blow that many games. I mean, you thought the Seahawks had it bad, but it all went pretty well. It's not as bad as the New York Giants. So that's it for Real in the Field Goals. And yeah, you know what to do if you've been listening for a while. So do all those things, and we will be back on here in a couple of days. Bye.
Bye.